Most people I talk to about retirement, they aren't confused. They're just overwhelmed. And my job is to help simplify what really matters. Ever wonder how much a retired couple actually spends each month? The number might surprise you. And it probably isn't what you think. Most people picture retirement as either wildly expensive or just too uncomfortably tight. They imagine constant budgeting, endless trade-offs, or a lifestyle that just feels smaller than the one they really worked hard for. But today we're going to slow this conversation down. We're going to break real retirement spending down step by step. And more importantly, we're going to talk about why retirement often costs less than what people expect. Not because retirees are struggling, but because priorities change. And once you understand that, living in comfort without unnecessary stress, it becomes very possible. If you're worried retirement will be expensive or that you won't be able to afford the lifestyle you want, take a breath. You're not behind, folks. You're not missing some secret formula that's being hidden out there. You're definitely not alone in feeling this way. A lot of people do. Most retired couples spend far less than people expect. Not because they're depriving themselves, but retirement removes a lot of hidden costs from your daily life. There's no commuting. There's no work clothes to buy. There's less impulse spending. You've got more control over time. The goal here isn't to stress over every penny. It's clarity. When you understand your real costs, the fear starts to fade. I've had this conversation with hundreds of people before retirement and after. And what surprises them most, it isn't the math. It's how much simpler life actually becomes. Housing is usually the biggest expense in retirement, but it's also where the biggest relief often shows up. For many retirees, the mortgage is paid off or downsizing has already happened. Or rent is chosen for stability, not for status. And that changes everything. When housing costs are predictable, the rest of retirement feels manageable. For a typical retired couple in a modest home, utilities, property taxes, insurance, basic maintenance, they often come in around $800 to $1,200 a month combined. Now, this isn't a luxury setup, but it's comfortable, it's secure, and here's the key point most people miss. Retirement housing isn't about impressing anyone. It's about peace. Overspending on space upgrades or location, it doesn't automatically increase your happiness, but it does increase the pressure. Once housing is steady, everything else becomes easier to manage. Food is usually the second largest category. And again, retirement shifts the equation. Most retired couples, they spend $300 to $500 per month on groceries when they plan even modestly well. Why? Because time becomes your advantage. You can cook more meals at home. You can shop sales. You can find seasonal items. You can avoid last-minute takeout. You can buy in bulk when it matters. Folks, this isn't about extreme frugalness. It's about rhythm. Cooking becomes part of the day. It's not a chore that you squeeze in between work and exhaustion. And dining out becomes intentional. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's lunch instead of dinner. Maybe it's quality over quantity. Food costs, they stay pretty predictable. And predictable costs reduce stress. Quick pause here. If you appreciate retirement conversations that are calm, realistic, and practical, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. We focus on real numbers, real trade-offs, and strategies that you can actually use. Not fear, not hype, or unrealistic promises. All right, let's keep going. Healthcare is where a lot of retirement anxiety lives. And that makes sense because it feels unpredictable. But with planning, it becomes manageable. Most retired couples rely on Medicare, a supplemental plan, prescription coverage. And for many couples, care costs, land around $600 to $800 per month, depending on coverage and your health needs. That number can sound intimidating until you compare it to what people often pay while they're still working. They've got premiums, they've got deductibles, commuting stress, delayed care. All of that adds up, folks. In retirement, preventative care improves. Appointments are easier to schedule. Health becomes a priority instead of an afterthought. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough: staying active, even modestly, saves money. Walking, cooking at home, managing stress, small habits protect both your budget and your peace of mind. Retirement isn't just about covering the essentials. It's about enjoying life. But enjoyment looks different in retirement. Instead of constant spending, it becomes selective spending. Travel, hobbies, dining out, memberships, entertainment. Many couples budget $200 to $400 a month for lifestyle expenses. Some months are heavier. A trip, a family visit, special event. Some months are lighter. And that flexibility is the secret. You're not chasing excitement every weekend. You're building a life you don't need to escape from. Spending becomes intentional, not impulsive. Life still happens in retirement. Cars need repairs, homes need maintenance, birthdays show up, grandkids grow. That's why a buffer matters. Setting aside $100 to $200 per month creates breathing room. I call it my emergency fund. It's not perfection, it's flexibility. Because retirement isn't about rigid budgets. It's about adaptability. When surprises don't cause panic, retirement feels calm instead of fragile. And when you add it all up, housing, food, healthcare, lifestyle buffer. Now this assumes a paid off, modest housing situation, not a luxury lifestyle, and not a worst case scenario either. Many retired couples, they spend somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 each month. And that number surprises a lot of people. Not because it's tiny, but because it's realistic. Retirement doesn't require a massive income. It requires alignment. When spending matches your values, stress fades. If you're worried about retiring in comfort, just remember this: housing stability matters most. Food costs are manageable with time and planning. Healthcare is predictable with preparation. Lifestyle spending works best when it's intentional. You don't need perfection, folks. You don't need luxury. You need clarity. Peace and freedom are possible without huge income or constant worry. Folks, if this helped, watch the next video. I think you'll want to see it. It's called Why Chasing the Perfect Retirement Backfires. It explains how waiting for the ideal moment quietly steals your time, your confidence, and your peace. And if you want honest, calm conversations about retirement without all the hype, make sure you're subscribed to Retired Under Budget. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me here today, and I'll see you in the next one.